It is a pleasure and honor for me to introduce to you Juliana Mariano Alves from Brazil. Her talk is about, you can see, water governance for sustainability. What do we need for a viable future? So welcome, Juliana.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for introduction. It's a great joy and also a challenge to be here today. I'm honored to be part of this community and very happy to present my work. It will be an opportunity to reconnect with friends and mentors whose partnership has been fundamental in my journey. I would like to express my gratitude to the organizing committee of this event, particularly to Dr. Igor Perko for the kind invitation. Today, my focus is on the question, water governance for sustainability. What do we need for a viable future? A topic that invites us to rethink traditional approaches. The north of Brazil, where I come from, is rich in fresh water, but suffers from poor governance. My research aims to contribute by proposing a novel integrative organizational framework for water governance, addressing challenges and shaping collaborative ecosystems for tomorrow, in line with our Congress team. Here is the agenda for this presentation. I will outline and discuss critical aspects for water governance that I have observed as a delegate on environmental and water councils, and as a consultant on polycentric policies for the Brazilian Ministry of Environment. I will also share a case study which demonstrates how organizational cybernetics support the diagnosis and design of a river basin organization, with a focus on its viability and sustainability. Let's begin by introducing some key concepts and the context of the water governance in Brazil. A river basin is often seen as just a geographic area where water converges, but it's also a political and ideological construct shaped by ecological changes, regulatory decisions, economic and social forces. Three features of river basins are essential for water governance. River basins do not adhere to political boundaries. They are recursive systems, and they are complex dynamic systems. These features stress the need for a governance model that is not only reflective of the systems they manage, but also capable of co-evolving in response to dynamic challenges. In the words of Conant and Ashby, every good regulator of a system must be a model of that system. Society has always found ways to manage water resources, whether informally or formally. When integrated water management is needed to address floods, droughts, protect ecosystems, or improve upstream-downstream relations, the common approach is to consolidate water-related functions within a specialized single-purpose river basin organization. River basin organizations, hereafter referred to RBOs, appear all over the world as existing institutions or as upcoming arrangements in reforms in the water sector. I will refer to RBOs as an alternative to existing institutions, which are considered fragmented, inefficient, incapable of the necessary political action, and driven by concerns beyond water governance. This diagram illustrates how RBOs have emerged in response to evolving water management discourses and the diverse range of organizations, such as epistemic communities, political leaders, development banks, aid agencies, and social movements, who have promoted these ideas through their evaluation and diffusion efforts. In terms of scope, RBOs began as a community-based organizations, evolved into catchment-based organizations, and have expanded to include more centralized RBOs that now manage national and transboundary. The introduction of RBOs marked a shift in water governance in Brazil, emphasizing autonomy and self-organization, in sharp contrast to the centralized and technocratic model of the military regime in the 20th century. However, this design amplifies the variety required for effective governance, demanding communication and control across different levels of complexity and adapts to the diverse needs and challenges of the RBOs. My work has been to understand and outline this tangled web of institutions and organizations to contribute to enhancing the institutional capacity of RBOs in Brazil. In this process, the science of organizational cybernetics can help increase the coherence and effectiveness of these organizations, eventually enabling the viability of the RBOs we have studied. Until now, I have discussed the increasing complexity and highly fragmented nature of current outer governance. From now on, I shall focus on the case study. The case study's purpose is to diagnose the status quo of the Formoso RBO and suggest organizational improvements. Therefore, the following research question arises. What can we learn about the dysfunctional coordination within the Formoso RBO and possible improvements in governance to enhance its viability and sustainability by applying the viable system model? We apply VSM because it is unique. The VSM establishes the necessary and sufficient structural precondition for the viability of any organization. While many organizational theories only specify the necessary conditions for success, the VSM goes further and undertakes the bold endeavor of specifying the sufficient conditions for viability. The VSM's approach to ensure organizational viability aligns perfectly with the needs of the RBOs to remain effective and adaptable. The case study centers on region which holds enormous water resources, northern Brazil. The Araguaia Tocantins is the largest RBO located entirely within Brazil, covering nearly 11% of the country's territory. The Araguaia Tocantins RBO is part of the hydric system with viable systems at each recursive level. This implies that each RBO at every recursive level pursues its own viability. In VSM terms, we refer to an RBO and the hydric system it controls as a primary unit. The structure displayed in the figure maintains primary units at all recursive levels in balance, at least within the limits set by a higher order unit. This means that the autonomy of these units is high, but limited by the need for cohesion among all primary units. Each of the primary units is a structural replication of the whole in which it is embedded. These units ensure the hydric services of regulation, provision, support, and cultural services related to water. Our system in focus is the Formoso RBO, a primary unit at a deeper level of recursion. The Formoso RBO has a direct impact on the National Park of Araguaia, a key conservation area in Brazil, recognized as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. This park is also home to the Carajá, Javaé, and Xambioá indigenous people who have been living on the Araguaia Plain since at least the 17th century. The Formoso RBO consists of 5 main primary units and uses nearly 600 billion liters of water each year over an irrigated area of 100,000 hectares. To put it in perspective, this volume of water could supply the capital of Tocantins with 300,000 residents consuming 150 liters per day for 36 years. An alarming situation exists in the primary units, where demand for irrigation exceeds the water availability by 200%, placing it in a critical condition. The rich picture on the slide outlines the problem and situation regarding the water crisis in Formoso RBO. It captures the diverse perspectives, interactions, and dynamics of the crisis, illustrating the interconnected stakeholders and issues involved. So, the governance and allocation of water in the system in focus are strongly connected. The irrigation systems represent a problem of asymmetry in water access for some users. The governance and allocation of water in the system in focus are strongly connected. The irrigation system represents a problem of asymmetry in water access for some users. The most efficient allocation regimes need enhanced coordination among the various stakeholders and a bolstering of the institutional capacity to adapt to the increasing complexity in the Formoso RPO. Using the VSM has been key in clarifying these issues, providing a clear framework to understand complex interactions and reinforce organizational functions in the system in focus. The resulting map on the screen offers a detailed snapshot of the current state of water resource. Diagram maps the constellation of stakeholders involved in an integrative management system within the Formoso RBO, and in the functions of the 5 subsystems of the VSM. Furthermore, the diagram exhibits the connections between these subsystems. Words in italics and yellow indicate missing components or dysfunctions. Let's take a closer look at the primary units. The allocation of water use rights serves as an attenuator of the environmental variety by aligning the demand with the water availability in the primary units. The mismatch between demand and water availability indicates that the primary units have an eigenvariety below the threshold required to respond effectively to the environment's complexity. The meta-systems of the primary units are deficient, with dominant stakeholder groups, namely agro-industrial corporations or farmers' associations, as well as the judiciary controlling the scene. Hence, local management is not up to the task of carry out the day-to-day operations to maintain water services. Local management should handle tasks such as diagnosing the current situation, monitoring and producing information on its primary units. The negative implications of this deficiency are evident in discussions about projects, products, and potential benefits that often fail to produce concrete results in primary units. For example, although it has been deliberated by S3 and S5 since 2015, the charts of water use have yet to be implemented in Formoso RBO. Without information generated by primary units, System 3 lacks the strength to generate cohesion or extract the necessary synergies for implementing water use charges. The deficiency weakens the capacity of S3 with its competencies, knowledge, and resources being undermined by the dominant groups. The primary units behave like autopoietic beasts, where the focus is solely on individual objectives, without a clear sense of how their actions fit into the purpose of the system in focus. Another important dysfunction in our system in focus is that the operational meta-systems is too small to cope with the challenges of the managing and coordinating the primary units. The functions of S1, S2, S3, and S3 star, which should be interconnected through information, are not so, because the responsible channel for interconnection either does not exist or has insufficient capacity. The infrastructure is insufficient and the technical team is limited. In addition, deficiencies in interoperability between federal and state levels information systems challenges the coordination of primary units, because full interoperability requires conceptual alignment between the two systems. For example, one system might refer to a river, while another could distinguish between perennial rivers and temporary streams. These cement gaps pose a challenge of our system in focus. The communication channels lack the capacity required to process, for instance, inconsistencies in historical data flow from hydrometeorological monitoring stations, lack of automation within decision support systems for water allocation, insufficient training capacity, low capacity for supervision and compliance auditing in the primary units, as well as a lack of provision of the technical license manual to guide water users. I also want to highlight our findings in S5. The mission and values of the Formoso RBO are deeply embedded in the constitutional principles of Brazilian democracy and sovereignty. Nevertheless, the deliberative profile of the S5 tends to translate into a recording chamber function, where decisions made in S3 are merely endorsed or ignored instead of being discussed in detail. The lack of a functional audiodonic channel is evident and remains unaddressed by S5 during water crisis. Even if the crisis alarm is triggered, it does not alert higher authorities about the situation and the need for a proper response. This highlights critical deficiencies in the organization's ability to detect and react to emergencies in a timely manner. This led to a judicial intervention in 2016, with effects that are still ongoing. The intervention primarily seeks to regulate water use by the large agricultural enterprises operating in primary units. Implementing water governance here to balance the variety equation is challenging, but it also represents an opportunity for the Formoso RBO to amplify its eigen variety. The scheme outlined on the screen provides a summary of the suggested redesign of water governance in the Formoso RBO. The objective is to balance the varieties in each pair of mutually governing systems. In cybernetic terms, our analysis for diagnosing and designing focuses on understanding and shaping the levers of variety amplification and attenuation to balance the interactive system under study. We call this variety. The operations have to attenuate the variety of the environment by aligning water availability with demand through the standardization of resistation and water use rights allocation procedures. And it needs to amplify its own variety by producing information on its primary units. It is important to correctly delimit the boundary between primary units and their environments. The management meta system amplifies its own variety to regulate and develop the primary units. On the other hand, it attenuates the variety of the primary units to make the joint discourse and action possible. Coordination first task is to attenuate variety by damping oscillations between the primary units, and filtering informations come from this. In turn, coordination augments its variety in serving management and primary units. The environment must be gauged in regard of its potential variety at present and in the future. Which trends will increase the complexity of the environment? Ecological, social, economic crisis, growing needs and demands, fragmentation of stakeholder groups, new claimant groups. Understanding these trends is crucial for an effective variety engineering. The proposal allows managers to focus on the viability and sustainability of the Formoso RBO. It provides the framework to distinguish between functional and dysfunctional structures and behaviors. The governance of the Formoso RBO involves the task of reconciling diverse interests, such as those of farmers, local communities, and other stakeholders at the organizational boundary. Herein lies the biggest challenge to achieve the requisite variety. So let's us return to our main proposition formulated at the outset. Governance of RBOs can be improved significantly by using such a systemic organizational framework. So we can conclude. The VSM theory asserts that it offers the necessary and sufficient preconditions for the viability of any social system. If this theory holds, then the diagnosis realized and the design proposed in this study should lead to a significant improvement in the governance of the Formoso RBO. At this point, the research question can be answered. The features, functionalities, and dysfunctionalities discussed and analyzed in the diagnosis resulted in a proposal. This research can foster improvements in water governance because it is grounded on a strong theory. The proposed design is of a functional structural nature. It includes an organizational strategy of involving local communities in decision-making, motivating stakeholder cooperation, and using data-driven approaches for more informed policies. In essence, this research is not just about improving management in RBOs. It's about fostering an informed approach to autonomy and self-organization that can make a real difference in people's lives. Can the insights from this case study be generalized? The theoretical claim is that VSM is a framework applicable to any social system for the purpose of diagnosing and redesigning it. In other words, regardless of location or size, an RBO can be molded by VSM. The VSM, if applied competently, could wield similar benefits for the governance of any RBO. However, the limitations here are evident. First, application is not enough for success. A professional theory-driven use for the model is the crucial precondition for an improvement of the situation. Second, an empirical validation of the single proposal is possible only in hindsight. That is, once the proposal has been implemented in practice. The VSM as a framework has been clearly endorsed in our case. The quoted literature attests that the model is particularly suited to identify potential improvements and their subsequent realization. The case study discussed here provided a similar experience. In all cases, the interviews of the stakeholders showed that the intervention was considered to be valuable. In many cases, it was noted that the initiative should be taken further. At this moment, we are also applying the VSM for the governance of the Lake of Palmas RBO. We are leading an action research project funded by the Leading House for the Latin America region in partnership with the Swiss Federal Aquatic Research Institute and the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. Some materials that we produced in our project. In summary, this framework has a huge potential for the future. In the Formoso River Basin organization, the future begins right now. The prerequisites to the future need to be created today. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you for your presentation. I want to tie it to what was said in the beginning by the fellows. The importance of a systems thinker as a diagnostician, as the ability to understand what the system is saying and what it is speaking. And I want to tie that to a definition, I think, of this whole conference, which is about intelligence. F. Scott Fitzgerald talked about, he was the great Gatsby, talking about the commentary of wealth in America, feedback, etc. But he defined intelligence as the ability to hold two separate ideas in the mind and still be able to function. And what I see in the importance of your work is there is an idea in our heads as human-centric, and there's a system of rivers, water, interactions. The ability to hold those two in the mind and still be able to function is the definition of intelligence that is lacking today. And the discipline I think we're trying to create here, and I'd like your comment on that, is the ability to create diagnosticians, basically the ability to diagnose systemic problems so that only our human-centric thinking doesn't cause more problems. Could you talk more about the intelligence of what you are doing with the natural system and the totally artificial system, not of our technologies, but of our minds?
I don't know if I can talk about intelligence teorias sistêmicas e práticas sistêmicas, ou mesmo cibernética, nos coloca a ter uma visão do todo, uma visão integrativa.
She thinks that the systemic and cybernetic theories offer us a more integral vision, more holistic vision. Yeah.
E nessa perspectiva, nós também podemos olhar para as partes, investigar as partes, mas lidar com o todo.
And from this perspective, we can investigate the parts of the whole and understand the relationships between the parts and the whole.
Na minha experiência no trabalho com comunidades, com agricultores, com mulheres no Tocantins, o pensamento sistêmico e a prática sistêmica tem sido importante para dar uma visualização e para promover a participação dessas pessoas nos problemas e nas decisões, de forma que elas possam...
The experience that she has had working with communities, in particular farmers, agricultures, people from local communities and so on, using these systemic ideas have helped to create an environment of participation and democracy in how to handle the problems.
Yes, I think it's about this.
So that's very likely her answer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was fascinating. There are many different questions I would like to ask. There's one. Could you give some illustrations that are, for you, significant of the actual phenomena of what would be done or is being done that would be transformative? What actually does it look like in terms of the actual event action phenomenon?
Espetacular os avanços que nós temos tido neste campo, no estado do Tocantins, principalmente porque quando nós iniciamos o estudo, as pessoas desconheciam, inclusive, as funções de uma organização de bacias hidrográficas. O que é estratégico, o que é norma, o que é operação, como é que se dá o processo de coordenação, porque são muitos instrumentos para se colocar em prática, é um sistema muito complexo e as pessoas não conseguem se identificar ali.
So basically what she says is that the most interesting, that it's been really spectacular, the use of these ideas with people, because it's so complex, the kind of functions and processes, and people are not aware and doesn't understand all the issues about policies, and by using the model, it's been able for people to understand, to visualize, and to understand more how to relate with the system. Yeah, so it's been like a learning from people on how to relate, and a way of understanding more simply by using all this, by doing all this analysis. Yeah.
Por exemplo, a cobrança do uso da água, charges, né? S3 tem a responsabilidade de implementar a cobrança de água, mas isso nunca era implementado, isso nunca era colocado em prática. Desde que nós iniciamos o estudo e demonstramos para o comitê, para as pessoas que estavam envolvidas, que eles tinham autonomia para colocar aquele assunto em prática, eles começaram a se mobilizar, a correr atrás das autorizações, dos processos que precisavam, e recentemente o governo do estado do Tocantins publicou o decreto autorizando a cobrança do uso da água. Então, estamos próximos de fazer isso.
Por exemplo, for example, with the charging of the charges for water, yeah, people were not completely aware of the process of how to charge water, and the fact of having the possibility of discussing with the local authorities and the communities what was the process and what was the way to do it, allow people to realize that it was possible to do it in a more independent way. So the government created some laws in which allowed more autonomy for the local authorities to do the charges, and they are sort of changing the laws and creating a context in which these charges can be implemented much more with the support and the monitoring of the local community. Yeah, so they managed to change some of the mechanisms like that was in BSM a system 3 kind of function and a system 2 kind of function. So they managed to intervene and change things which allow more engagement from people. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I have a practical question. Have you presented this work to those in charge in the Brazilian government? And if yes, what kind of responses have you ever getting from them?
No nível federal, eu ainda não apresentei. Eu tenho uma apresentação para fazer nos próximos meses para a Agência Nacional das Águas, mas no nível estadual eu apresentei e tive muita resistência por parte das autoridades governamentais, no sentido de abrir o campo para o estudo ser apresentado, porque, na minha interpretação, eles perceberam que as coisas estavam claras naquele diagnóstico, as funções, as responsabilidades, os impactos, e na medida que a gente percebe... Okay.
So basically, she's saying that she did have some presentations to the government. In some cases, it was well received because they liked the clarity of the diagnosis and the way of presenting and sort of understanding more the problem. But also there has been some resistance from some of the authorities. That's what she's going to explain now. So basically, she's saying that she opened a way of talking to the government, and it is not concluded. She's still in the process. She's planning more presentations and more discussions, but she opened, it is next month that she's going to do a more open presentation. So she's in the process of generating these discussions. It's not concluded. Some good feelings in terms of the clarity of the diagnosis and the understanding that she's providing with her diagnosis. Still some resistance, and that's where she is.
Yes, if you here, we have a strong relationship in the government, state government, with the agricultures, the big agricultures. They talk directly. And we have a system when we have a river basin committee, water councils, we have a democratic work here, but they talk directly with the government. And it's very, very difficult to enter and do something in this context. So the VSM is a powerful model to show these connections in a way, in a technical way. For me, this is very important. Brazil, it's a hard place to work in community, shows problems like that I show for you can be tragic, and we don't have in the base, we don't have a lot of power. And yes, I really like this tool because I can show in a technical way. Yes, you have a connection here, doesn't work, this connection. We need to talk about this connection because this. And I think it's a good way to act in my context because could be very dangerous.
Obrigada por la presentación. So thank you very much for the presentation. I feel a little bit uneasy about some of it is because the VSM is really directed towards social systems, human social systems. And we're talking about a river basin, which is an ecological system. And indirectly, you have the river basin as an ecological system represented maybe through the indigenous people, to some extent through the farmers and so on. The people in their government offices don't interact directly with the environment in the same way. So my concern is that the measurement of the health of the ecosystem is very indirect, and you don't have within your what I see on the displays is you don't have sort of an office for data on the quality of the health of the ecosystem itself.
A bacia hidrográfica, enquanto uma construção social, ela não é só ecológica. Então, nós temos as interações ocorrendo neste contexto com os diferentes atores, os diferentes interessados, e o que nós temos e o que nós discutimos no trabalho é a possibilidade da comunidade, dos indígenas, coletarem a água, fazerem o seu próprio trabalho de qualidade de água, e a gente pode comparar isso no contexto dos dados oficiais. E é o que a gente tem feito atualmente, principalmente no trabalho com a bacia do Lago de Palmas, que nós estamos iniciando agora. Nós estamos contestando os valores de qualidade de água oficial com os valores que nós estamos encontrando.
She's basically saying that she has understood like the unit of analysis, like the socio-ecological system of the river basin. And at that level, her study has sort of managed to clarify who are the stakeholders and who are the communities and agricultures and all that, and the relationship between them and the government. And she is aware that there is a need to have a more local way of understanding the water, because obviously the way of the government to do it may be disjunctive with the way. So she's learned that, and in the new case study that she's doing in Palmas, she's beginning to consider more ways of measuring the quality of the water by the locals. Yeah, so it's part of the learning, but it's a very interesting question. Thank you.
It is not really a question, just a consideration for your presentation. It is very, very nice, very powerful to me, because when you say that if your example could be generalized, I think yes, not only because of the good example and very insightful example of the application of the viable system model and the approach, but maybe like a metaphor for the embracement of system thinking. I think could be very powerful for students, for example, because in our stream of study, the viable system approach, we strive to help students, but also professionals, to become aware of the structural based approach, the static view of the reality. So the river idea, the river metaphor could become a powerful example of how important it is to be not only to adopt, but also to be aware of the dynamic functioning of the systems. And also the fact that we used to look at the resources like in an object-based approach, like if they were not alive. But the river is the very excellent example of the nature and its life functioning. So probably the active role of the river within the systems become very useful to understand that not only the river suffers from the humans' behavior, but also humans at the social, economic, and the same environmental level suffer from the behavior of the river when humans are not really wise people.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, your comment, it's very nice. Thank you very much. And I agree. Yeah. My email, and you can write me. I will be very happy to answer all questions. And for me, it's easier because read and writing, it's better. But
I assume that the timetable will restart almost as late as we're overrunning now. I'm interested in the stakeholder question. It's not just about humans. Obviously, VSM is crucial in optimizing water flow. The penalties of success, even if people want more water, even if they won't want more water, they will want something else. And it's a question of how you balance the individual selfishnesses of groups, persuade them that they should be curtailed and the water should flow somewhere else. So yeah, I mean, what about the rights of the intelligent nervous systems which aren't human beings, which are having water supply attenuated? Or is there far more than enough water anyway, and we're going to feel the nip somewhere else along the line?
This is a challenge, a big challenge. We have been working about this, talking with more education. We have many problems with education in our context. Understand the complexity and the interaction in the system. It's very hard to people in the base. So we are discussing.
We have to teach a human world altruism, but maybe not starting in Brazil first.
Me desculpa, mas eu acho que o egoísmo é parte da natureza humana e nós não vamos conseguir lidar com isso matando o egoísmo. Ele é parte.
She's saying that selfishness is part of human nature and that it's not easy to finish selfishness, well, in a situation like this.
Mas nós podemos melhorar a nossa relação com a água e buscar uma transformação, buscar melhores possibilidades para o nosso desenvolvimento.
But she says that we can improve our relationship with water, with the management of water, and try to look for better possibilities of how can we do that collectively. Yeah.
And I would like to invite you for our workshop in the afternoon, because we will work about these questions in.
Yes, this actually we have all day here. We're going to be continue working in BSM on this room, and by the end of the day, from 5 to 6:30, it's going to be a workshop, and the topic is going to still be water management and other case studies that the speakers are going to be presenting. But we're going to come back specifically to talk about the relationship between BSM and Eleanor Ostrom and the commons. So that's the next, after the coffee break, we can talk more about that, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.